the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael. I am your host here this morning. I'm glad that you've joined us, and I see a ton of you out there on our website. I'm assuming you're either listening or watching live. Got Sioux Falls out there. I got San Juan Capistrano, Fort Walton Beach, Columbia, Maryland, I believe. Town and Country. I've got, Chicago area. I've got Maine. I've got Florida, Texas, New Mexico. Glad to see you all out there today. Thank you for those of you that are joining us on Patriot FB as well and on Big Country 99. Glad to hear you guys have gotten together with us this morning. So, I've been covering isolated cases over the last couple of months. The last couple of years, actually. But I think we've reached a point in which we have to recognize the crescendo of a police state completely, totally, and utterly out of control. And, there are a number of websites out there that do a fair job of educating people about it, but I don't know how much traffic they get. I don't know how much information they're able to bring in. What I've decided to do today is to address some of what's going on. And so, basically, we need to shine the disinfecting sunlight on the abuse that is happening every day in our country and alert other fellow Americans, our countrymen, to what is happening and figure out how we can bring this to a halt. We have to stop this slide, ladies and gentlemen, because I got to tell you, it's not isolated incidents. It's not the growth of cameras. It's not the growth of social media that's teaching us about these things. The number of out of control assaults on civilians and innocent individuals, the number of murders by cop have grown so staggeringly high, they are unavoidable. We can no longer ignore the truth that we have a law enforcement in this country that has been militarized and is now preying, and I mean preying, upon the United States of America, the average citizen. Between their lust for a use to put their training to a use, to their lust for blood in many cases, to the desire to boost and bolster their revenue streams by forfeiture and at any cost by any means necessary, we have become a Nazi police state, ladies and gentlemen, and it is completely and totally out of control. I mean, I'm just going to give you a sampling of some of the stories today, but the truth is there are literally thousands upon thousands of stories, all in the last year or two, that are so egregious, so outrageous, you would think you were reading science fiction when you hear some of these stories. Case after case after case of murder, abuse, people being shot, people being robbed, literally, at gunpoint by the state. Robbed of their livelihood, their homes, their cars put into forfeiture, not because they've done something wrong, but because they don't even have to be charged for forfeiture laws to be put into place, to be activated. In the United States of America, we have allowed forfeiture to be the guiding light of law enforcement, not because it's right, not because they're stopping drug proceeds, merely because law enforcement can add to their treasure trove, quite frankly, of cash and goods. And I got to tell you, it's out of control. There are organizations within law enforcement that are attempting to fight this. You know, you have groups like the CSPOA, the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. But, you know, they're a minority. They're a lone voice in the wilderness. Law enforcement across the country has become depraved, I mean, savage and vicious. Are there good cops out there? Absolutely. Am I demonizing every individual in law enforcement? No. But I got to tell you, since you guys won't police yourselves, since you won't clean up your own house, you're going to leave us no choice but to do it for you. And in order to accomplish that task, in order to accomplish that, we are going to have to expose you, the dirty, ugly underside of what you're doing in our country. You refuse to police yourselves. You refuse to stop the slaughter, the mayhem, the murder, the abuses of our Fourth Amendment, our Fifth Amendment rights, our First and Second Amendment rights. You won't stop it on your own. You leave us no choice. And it needs to stop. I'm going to give you a sampling of some stories this morning. The 4 topics that I've chosen are police brutality. Police state brutality is a national epidemic. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm not exaggerating with that statement. You know, we talked about this yesterday, and I gave you a website that you could go to called cato.org, cato.org, /raid map. Raid like R-A-I-D, like police raid, map. Gives you the ability to go look at a map and utilize a searchable index. How many law enforcement officers were actually injured or killed? How many civilians were injured and killed? How many of those were innocent? All these different factors, by state, by year, by all these different methodologies. I cannot strongly encourage you enough to go there, and then not just go there, but take the information and share it with others. Send your friends an email link with it and say, man, you guys ought to see this. Don't you understand that the only way that we as a collective group can fight back against this is by collectively putting our efforts together and exposing it for what it is? I mean, ladies and gentlemen, if you think that this is an exaggeration, go to YouTube and type in police brutality. Go in and type in police video. And watch what is going on. I mean, it is insane. The city of Baltimore just made a settlement with a guy who they beat the tar out of because he had a camera, and he was videoing some police officers who were arresting a number of unruly individuals in front of a pub one night. But, I mean, and I exposed it by showing you the video of it. The cop storms across the street and says, "You're interrupting me." I mean, the cop left the scene to walk across the street to accuse the guy. They just settled with him. The Supreme Court has made it very clear. There is no one in a law enforcement position that can say, you don't have a right to videotape me during the process. I mean, when you're a private citizen, you've got the same protections as us. But when you're on duty, the whole idea is that you are a public servant and everything that you do is a public act. And therefore, we're entitled as citizens to see it and know about it and expose it when it happens. But the penalties for doing so, ladies and gentlemen, are often tragic. I got to tell you, our second thing, I'm just going to give you case after case after case after case. I can list them. There's not enough time in today. There's not enough time if I were to broadcast from now till midnight for me to even scrape the surface of this tragedy. And I got to tell you, I am so heartbroken by it because this was the land of the free, the home of the brave. And now it's turned into this land of cowering, fearful people who are literally preyed upon by law enforcement. Our third topic, America has become a Nazi state of tyrants. And this isn't just law enforcement. This is administrative agencies. This is your Congress, your federal executive offices. This is the judges in the judicial system. And our final topic, what can you do to stop the slaughter and the lawlessness? I got to tell you, folks, if we do not acknowledge openly and publicly what's happening and put a stop to this, and in short order, we are soon going to be beyond the point where we can affect a solution. And when that point comes, Americans cannot be held responsible for defending and protecting themselves. You can't sit here and say to me that when individuals defend their home and their properties and their families from rogue police who are, I mean, these guys are acting like raping and pillaging Norsemen of old, Vikings. What the heck is happening in our country? They are the outlaws, not the other way around. They're no longer chasing the outlaws. And I'm going to read you something from a cop who will tell you exactly how it's working. In fact, I'm going to read it to you right now, just because we got, 10 minutes left. This is from a website called Police State USA. And it's an article by Lieutenant Harry Thomas. Now, Lieutenant Thomas used to be a police officer with and he's retired now, with Cincinnati, Ohio. He's a former member of the board of the National Rifle Association and also the Ohio Gun Collectors Association. He was twice the victim of assassination attempts by his own superiors in his department for his stance in support of gun ownership and against police success. He now has to live in the greater Indianapolis area because, frankly, he probably can't live in Ohio anymore. How to Serve a Warrant, 1972 versus today, by Lieutenant Harry Thomas. The transformation of law enforcement in my lifetime. This past week, I was over on officer.com, trying to convince some hot-headed, patriot-hating young cops that the Constitution is actually the law of the land. I failed. One of them refers to open carriers as attention whores, quote unquote. I was denounced as a traitor to law enforcement for insisting that gun owners actually have rights that Leos are legally and morally bound to respect. It got me thinking about the great gulf that now separates the law enforcement profession that I knew as compared to the one that exists today. I never thought I'd be one of those geezers that says, I just don't understand this younger generation today. But the fact is, I am, and I don't. And I offer this retrospective and comparison. How to Serve a Warrant in 1972. Plan A, a standard warrant. 1. The warrant officer at your station gives you a warrant for someone who lives on your beat. It's for an old drug possession beef. The suspect has no criminal history, ho-hum. 2. You go to the location. You knock on the door. If no one answers, you leave and come back another time. If your man answers the door, you either arrest him or cite him to court. If you know he's there, in other words, TV is on, curtains move as he peeks out the window at you, etc., but he won't answer the door, you call another car to watch the back while you go in the front and get him. If he submits, fine. If he resists you, thump him. Tasers are years in the future, of course. If he goes for a weapon, you shoot him. Fairly simple. No? Plan B. The crime is serious or the suspect is known to be dangerous. 1, bring more cops. 2, bring shotguns. And then he has a sub-note here that says, next to the bring shotguns, the only full autos that your department owns are a row of 1921 Thompson submachine guns with 50-round drum magazines, and strangely enough, a single M3 grease gun that are standing in a rack in the armory at the Criminal Investigation section of the Detective Bureau. The last time that one of them was deployed was in the late 1950s at a late-night stakeout inside a closed Kroger grocery store where a gun battle occurred between stakeout officers and a gang of professional burglars and safecrackers. One of your department's old cigar-chewing detectives from the gangster era used the chopper to fatally ventilate the bad guys. The old chatterguns have never been fired for effect since, and never will be again. You are not qualified on them, and no one in your 1,000-man department who is. If, through some miracle, you were to be qualified on one of the old war horses, the thought of taking one to a warrant service would never even occur to you, and the chances of you being able to sign one out for that purpose would be nil anyway. Cops use alley sweepers, a.k.a. shotguns, not trench brooms. Okay. Now, how to serve a warrant today. 1. The warrant office at your station gives you a warrant for someone who lives on your beat. It's for an old drug possession beef. The suspect has no criminal history. Drug possession. This guy is obviously degenerate and threatens the very fabric of civilization. There's no time to lose. 2. You and your pals put on black ninja outfits. You put black bags over your heads with little slits for your eyes. Now you can do anything you want, and no one can identify you afterwards. Hey, it worked for the PLO and the IRA, right? You call all of the schools within a 50-mile radius and tell them to go on lockdown. 3. You ride to the scene in an armored personnel carrier. Yes, I said an armored personnel carrier. 4. When you arrive, you jump out and storm the house, bristling with weapons that were, at one time, only used on foreign battlefields to engage implacable enemies of the United States and its interests. Now they're used against this country's civilian population. 5. The family's elderly Labrador, who is now approaching you, tail wagging, is obviously there to guard the drug kingpin's stash and presents a grave danger to law enforcement personnel. Hose him with your M16 or MP5 or whatever squirt gun your agency issues. That way the neighbors will see what a badass you are. 6. Don't knock on the door. That's for sissies. Take it down with a battering ram. Run in and cuss a lot like they do in those cool movies. Prone everybody out on the floor. When the family's other dog gets excited and starts barking, blow him away like you did the other one. Do it in front of the kids. This way they'll learn that the country's laws must be respected. 7. There are lots of news cameras outside because you called them ahead of time and told them to be there. March your prisoner out and look really grim. Now everyone watching the news can see your armored personnel carrier. Yes, I did say armored personnel carrier. And they can see how awesome you are in your ninja outfit. 8. Make sure your department spokesman is there to give an exciting account of your great victory. That way the pretty girl with way too much hair mousse can do a breaking news story about how you've struck a stunning blow to the international drug trade. Now, there are people who are going to think I'm being facetious here. Well, I'm not. Since the early 80s, the use of SWAT teams in civilian law enforcement has increased about 1,500%. No, those 2 zeros are not a typo. At least 40 completely innocent American citizens have been shot to death by rogue police, either because incompetent law enforcement officials hit the wrong address or because the startled homeowner attempted to defend himself against these masked strangers violently entering their home and they were gunned down. One of them, Katherine Johnson of Atlanta, was 92 years old. I well remember the first time my agency pulled one of those stunts and scared an innocent old lady damn near to death. Our chief did the one thing in his career that I actually admired. He sent down word that if any of our personnel ever again kicked down an innocent citizen's door, that they should send back the search warrant with their badge pinned to it, since they wouldn't be needing it anymore. It never happened again. How did this happen? How did we go in a few short years from a beat cop knocking on a door to a full-scale military assault reminiscent of Iwo Jima over somebody selling somebody else a bag of weed? It's because of the greatest and the biggest failed social experiment in this country's history, the drug war. I was around in the days of yore when the first drug forfeiture program started. If you could prove that a guy's stuff was purchased with the proceeds of drug trafficking, you could take the stuff. It was a great idea, and it hit these guys where they lived. And for a few years, the law chugged along that way. Then, law enforcement administrators started thinking about just how much plunder there really was out there. That thing about proving that the guy's stuff came from drug proceeds was a real drag. They said, hey, we have a great idea. Let's take people's stuff without proving that it came from a drug proceed. And they did. The law was changed. Law enforcement didn't need to convict people of anything. They didn't even have to charge them with anything. They could just take the stuff. The way it was explained to me in training was that the stuff was being treated as a separate entity, independent of its owner. In other words, the guy wasn't being charged with a crime. His car or his house or his cash was being charged with a crime. stuff could now commit crime and be convicted of them. A cop could hold a trial at the side of the road, convict somebody's money of drug trafficking, and then put the money in jail. Agencies scrambled to create drug interdiction units to patrol the expressways, such as I-75 from Florida to Michigan, which runs through my city. Their mandate? Steal money. In my agency, our higher-ups got so addicted to stolen money that there wasn't enough in our city to satisfy them. They cut a deal with the county sheriff and got a team of our guys commissioned as deputy sheriffs. Now they could patrol our expressways outside the county line, even outside the city limits. They're still doing it. Last week I drove into Ohio, and sure enough, there was a Cincinnati police officer just over the state line, nowhere near the city limits, watching for anyone who meets the profile. His mandate? Steal money. The only way the victim can get his money back is to sue the agency and try to prove it didn't come from drug proceeds. So much for due process and the presumption of innocence. Oftentimes, the cost of taking legal action exceeds the amount of money that was taken, so the victim just gives up. This is what agencies count on. Life is good for law enforcement agencies. The only difference between them and the pirates is the absence of an ocean. Highway robbery is back in vogue. Literally. So what do you do with all that dough? No government agency ever returns money to the Treasury. If they have any left at the end of the budget year, they go on a shopping spree, and what do they buy? Toys. SWAT. Now that's the latest fad. Soon, agencies all over the country were buying military hardware that had never before been needed or used in civilian law enforcement, and this was before Congress passed a law allowing the military to give them surplus hardware to the cops. Questions were raised, and SWAT is a legitimate concept and is needed in cases of barricaded persons, hostage situations, etc. But most agencies, even big ones, go for months and sometimes years without experiencing such an event. The toys gather dust. Officials and concerned taxpayers say, why do you need this stuff? No need, create a need. So that's why things that used to be handled in a low-key, non-confrontational way by street-savvy beat cops now require SWAT intervention, including routine service of warrants for insignificant and non-violent offenses. Are we better off? Well, I'll let you decide. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Lieutenant Harry Thomas. His article is up on Police State USA. It's How to Serve a Warrant. It's 1972 versus today. I got to tell you, folks, this is indicative of everything that is happening and everything that is wrong with America. We have law enforcement at this point that utilizes and abuses loopholes within the law to seize personal property, charge individuals with drug crimes, and seize their personal belongings, and not actually ever even have to charge them to keep their stuff. Then it's up to you to file a lawsuit to get it all back, if you have the money to hire an attorney, etc., etc. We're going to talk a lot more about this, and I'm going to give you some instances in our next segment. We're going to take a quick break right now. Stick with me. You're listening to America's Voice Now. You can communicate with me directly at mike@americasvoicenow.org. You can also find everything that we do up on our Facebook page at facebook.com/America's Voice Now and youtube.com/America's Voice Now. We'll be back in just a minute.